Data center, hybrid, 19 elements. I'm going to go through this. I think I'm going to catch up on our 5 minutes that we're behind, but we're going to be fine. So I'm Mark Evanko, principal engineer at BRUNS-PAK. A lot of you folks, thank you for your time and efforts over the years and participation. So I'm going to go through data center hybrid elements. What are they? What are people talking about? I'm going to talk about COVID-19 impacts, the cloud co-location enterprise that we're experiencing. I'm going to talk about the new 2020 workplace and data processing environment, and then projected impacts of the community moving forward. And then we'll go to Q&A, but we're going to defer that to the end. Let's go to the next one. Okay, let's talk about the 19 elements. Here in a nutshell is what BRUNS-PAK believes. As you've heard the speakers, whether it's Mike, whether it's Lee, Dr. Jim, you're going to hear about Sean Brady talking about that, and then Jonathan at the end with the cybersecurity. BRUNS-PAK has experienced these 19 elements. We have published this. We talk about it. We do phase 1 consulting studies that the data center overall hybrid transformation encompasses all these elements in a total cost of ownership versus best practice versus risk. That's the key to all this. So 1 is infrastructure. 2 talks about energy efficiency. But what are the compute hardware considerations 3 that I have? What's cloud? What's disaster recovery mean to me? Co-location, migration, application, modularity, scalability, communication network, service level agreements. You can go right on. CapEx versus OpEx, modular data centers. What are the legal repercussions? What's cybersecurity mean to me? Compliance, and as Mike was talking about, edge computing. This is all part of, our opinion, an enterprise data center hybrid solution in 2020 moving forward. Let's go to the next slide. So when we talk about cybersecurity, what we're experiencing, this continues to evolve and have many enterprise data center impacts. The end users, whether it's stockholders, whether it's trustees, whether it's government, they're concerned about their brand. They're concerned about the financial liability. They're concerned about responsible parties. The board trustees concerned, again, as many of you know, as I did my engineering, did my MBA, and I'm proud to say I never got out of law school because there's a fiduciary liability associated with board members. So putting a company at risk, knowingly or not knowingly, is a liability, and there's obviously risk to it. Going to the next slide. We talk about the transformation of the 2020 data center enterprise solution encompasses a hybrid approach. We are seeing that all over the board. What part enterprise, what part co-location, what part cloud, disaster recovery? How does edge play into my solution? What does modular data centers look like? How does cybersecurity play? Regulatory compliance issues, OpEx versus CapEx. The bottom line is in this studies is total cost of ownership versus best practice versus risk. I know I'm preaching to the choir, even down in Ethiopia. I had to throw that into it because Mel Brooks is my hero. But anyhow, the bottom line is this. It is all together. What's the best thing for my stockholders, my trustees, my taxpayers? Let's go to the next slide. The 2020 evolution of client-leased enterprise data centers. This is kind of interesting. What we're seeing is that some companies now are, if the CapEx cost was 25 million US dollars, there's actually funding companies now that are going there, designing and building that data center on site for that customer and then leasing it back to them for 30 years. Fascinating. In essence, it's their own OpEx cost. Whereas before you would have to go to colo cloud type of scenario. Absolutely fascinating. We're seeing that the impact of consolidation and transforming co-location providers, cloud providers, we're seeing that the industry, and Sean's going to be talking more about this, as they're getting very, very more competitive, if you would. We're also seeing legal language coming out of damages now, all of a sudden coming into provider contracts. What happens if my data goes away? I call it permanently borrowed. That's what we used in law school. You don't say stealing, permanently borrowed. What happens to the data if it goes away? Who's liable for that? What about downtime and edge computing and latency? Onward. Considerations of scalability. This is enough to roll your socks down. Where it used to be low density 1 to 3 kW, mid-range 4 to 10, mid-range. By the way, we're just doing a project right now starting at 50 to 60 kilowatts per cabinet. High performance compute research. Very interesting. And I know we have some of the Ivy League schools that we couldn't get into. I had to throw that in there. But anyhow, some of the high performance compute areas are amazing what the densities are going through. But the question is, how do you handle this? And then candidacy, we're seeing the applications. If they're tier 1, they might be staying home because of compliance and regulatory. But if they're test and development, they're spinning to the cloud. And there's a lot of co-location application for that as well. Onward. The instant delivery of goods, services, information, and the impact of the data center solution. This is key. Artificial intelligence, work process, brick and mortar versus online. We're seeing it with COVID-19 now. The bottom line is that brick and mortar, where's it going? You know, I'm an Amazon person. I don't need to go to a store anymore. Is that really the way we're going? And has the pandemic really kicked it into play? Yes. But the processing capabilities behind that are absolutely amazing. And the payment methods, right? How are you paying? Overall impact of cybersecurity, I'm going to defer to Jonathan and Mike and Keith when they get up there. It's amazing what's happening now. Onward. European General Data Protection Regulation. This has been in since 2018. The bottom line is, to net it out, is the European General Data Protection Regulatory Act says that, by the way, whoever owns that data is liable for it. So what we're seeing is that the days of when you get hacked and you get $99 in LifeLock and say, go buzz off, but you can't close on a mortgage, we're seeing those days are starting to get limited, because there is personal liability if you're possessing people's data. This gets back into who's liable if it's a third person site, who's liable for that data, who's liable if I can't close on my mortgage. And California, again, followed in 2018. We're seeing more and more of this come about. Next slide. So let's talk about Section 2, COVID-19 impacts, cloud, co-location. COVID-19, the impacts to continuous data processing have moved forefront to the concern list. This is key. How do I process? When do I process? How does this all happen? Cloud, co-location, enterprise. We're seeing an explosion of more applications towards cloud, towards co-location, because the bottom line is, if my facility, if I run into a problem, be it enterprise or whatever, I need to process. If you notice that no matter what ends up happening during this pandemic, the processing continues to dominate. It absolutely continues to dominate. You can take some people out of business. As a matter of fact, one of the big third-party providers had an outage a couple of weeks ago. It was kind of interesting, because what does that mean to me? What does that mean to my business? Does that mean I have to shut down? And what's the remote interface? What's the continuous support and operations? How do I do that? Next slide. Let's talk about cloud. Cloud is absolutely picking up even on some more of those applications, tier 4, 3, 2, getting even more and more migration to the cloud. The key is, though, now, and you'll see that in Sean's presentation, about people moving from co-location facilities to co-location or cloud facilities to cloud. That's not an inexpensive proposition. Forget what you're paying for lease per square foot, but that's a total cost of ownership when you talk about migration, relocation, potentially seed equipment. You have software applications like, it's absolutely enough to roll your socks down. So the key is we're seeing more and more cloud type of applications, cloud people occupying some of the colo facilities. And again, another issue that comes up that we're seeing, downtime, who pays? Security breach, who pays? Terms and conditions, the legal beagles, right, are in motion now, because, hey, if all of my stuff goes away, what do I do if I'm a board of director and that data permanently goes away and it takes me out of business? Who am I responsible to? So you get into the classic discussion of production versus test and development. Let's go on to the next one. So you can see applications are conducive to the cloud, as we talked about. Where's my data? Who manages it? New 2020 United States legislation, and we won't turn this into a political discussion, even for our friends over in England. We won't do that. But the point is this. There is company liability that they're discussing, although there's a lot of animosity against that for different people. Speed to delivery of applications, the contract language, we're sitting there getting more. And again, Jonathan and Keith are going to talk about liability associated with that. Moves, adds, and changes, Amazon, Microsoft, Google. If there's interruption, what's my impact to my business? Do I just shut down? Next slide. Co-location, leased data center constructed space. Bottom line, CapEx schedule of delivery minimized. Return on investment, generally what we're seeing is about 4 years. If you're more than 4 years in there, then potentially the cost-benefit ratio isn't there any longer. Am I concerned about other tenants, especially with impact of security? And now when you have these COVID, which is throughout the globe, does that mean that that operation has to shut down? Does that mean 1 out of 20 businesses or 20 out of 20 businesses could be impacted? Downtime, security breach is a concern. Again, the terms and conditions and the new United States legislation, maybe, who knows? I don't want to talk about the election. Let's keep on going. Plus the financial strength of service providers. What are they? Well, you know, the key is if they ever go away, do I go away? moves, adds, and changes, a new 2020 internal self-funded co-location. That's what I described to you earlier, that these investment companies are actually building customers' data centers, big-time customers, and leasing it back to them. They basically have an on-premise colo, for lack of better words. Let's go to the next one. Facility infrastructure. Obviously, you have all the different parts: architectural, electrical, fire protection, mechanical security, site structural, geographic consideration. This is absolutely key. But what we're finding is that the computational fluid dynamic models, CFD models, are really key. Can I handle 2 kW, 5 kW, 10 kW, 20? What if IT comes in with 30 kW? What are the thermodynamic impacts? How am I going to be able to handle it? The bottom line is you can handle it. It all depends on the CFD model and what you can go through and what you can go and deliver. Onward. Energy efficiency is real key. Bottom line is, why am I paying for the cost of energy? I don't want to pay for it, right? We went to 80-degree Fahrenheit inlet to 90-degree. The bottom line is, why don't I use outside air? We're in New Jersey today. It's what, 45 degrees outside. I should be using the outside air to cool my data center. So you have all kinds of containment techniques, cold aisle impact to people, and DCIM, by the way, is picking up more and more. If I can regulate my airflow and how I'm going to do that, COVID-19 is even making it more to, I want it to be all automated. I want not only monitoring, but I want controls. Let's go to the next slide. No. Oh, there we go. Management, envelope, applications, hardware, facility network, CFD models. If you haven't done them, you should, in your, whether you're colo or not, because it's going to tell you how high of a density you can go to. Outside air, as we talked about, to the data centers, virtualization of servers, and lead. The environmental impact is becoming more and more critical. The bottom line is, I want to utilize as least amount of energy to cool my data center that I need. Up in the state of Washington many years ago, I think Tommy's on, we talked about that, utilizing, I think it was 26 450 kW heat wheels to introduce outside air, to basically be able to utilize that outside air and get partial or full free cooling a large part of the year. Let's go to the next slide. New metrics associated with lead, be close to it. By the way, look at the electric utility costs. Sean will talk to you. He's going to show you where these big colos are building. Well, guess what? Take a look at their utility costs. 18 cents per kilowatt hour. You got to be not. I can't insult the IBC guys because they're there, but anyhow. The bottom line is you want to go where 3 cents per kilowatt hour. Procedures, as we talked about, and standards of data center operating and guidelines. Let's go to the next slide. So let's talk about some 2020 workplace and data center processing environment issues that we want to be concerned about. Workplace, work from home, you bet. And by the way, maybe work from home forever. Accountability software. That's why Salesforce is going through the roof, in my opinion, part of it, because it's all accountability. Why do I have to have my people in my building? Can I run all my operations outside? They might be staying there. And by the way, the benefit, the real estate industry might not be too good, because do I really need a 300,000 square foot office building? I don't think so. So the bottom line is, as a matter of fact, we talked to one gentleman that had a 550,000 square foot, he still does, office building 3 years ago, grade A space, it's still not rented. And he says, should I convert it to a data center? So the issue is going to be about, if I'm home, what do I do with cybersecurity? How do I make sure I'm safe? Master cities, multi-story office buildings. I don't think I'm getting on an elevator going up 55 stories with 10 people that include Jim and Lee Henchman and Mike Wynn and Sean Brady and Jonathan. I'm not doing that. Again, I'm paranoid. I'm also a germaphobe now because of my good friend Ronald. But anyhow, there's going to be testing protocols, meeting confidential documents. Let's talk about this. Let's go to the next slide. Data center. What does the new 2020 workplace look like? Do I even need to be there? Do I need to be anywhere near colocation or my enterprise data center? Can I run it all remotely? This to me is absolutely fascinating. And I think we're going to see the dynamics change about shared office space. And do I only bring 100 people in? Some of our customers they have multi-thousand square foot buildings with multi-thousands of people, and they only have 30 people going to the building now. Are they finding out that they can be as productive working remotely? And by the way, the space, power, and cooling is in the person's home, and the network connectivity is there. And by the way, they don't have that cost. That's going to be a fascinating thing coming up. Let's go to the next slide. Section 4, let's talk about projected impacts of the data center community moving forward. Remote monitoring, big, is going to continue to dominate. DCIM, monitor and control. We're seeing that big time. I don't need to be anywhere. I can be in my own office to control this. Backup contingency plan, they want mirrored type of replication on tier 1 applications. Explosion of remote accountability software. If I know that Lee Henchman isn't golfing and he's actually doing his work, I had to throw that in, Lee. But anyhow, I know that I can, if he's as productive there, actually he's more productive because he's starting his day early and ending late. Video conferencing, I'm doing between 25 and 40 WebExes a week with the customer. Cybersecurity challenge, that's certainly something that's out there. Edge compute rollout, as Mike was talking about, artificial intelligence is dominating. High performance compute clusters, I never thought. Now we're actually talking to one guy, we're talking about 70 kW per cabinet and consolidation. Onward. Ultimately, we're into questions and answers, but you know what? We don't need to do it. I see the questions coming in left and right. This is Mark Evanko. Thank you.